Welcome to week 1 of the Pantry Challenge at the Hometown Homestead. I have to tell you, it has been a very busy week. We failed. I had to run to the store. We have sick kids that have been going on for weeks, just the nastiest tummy bug ever. So you might see a few of us in and out, but we have a lot going on, and I'm excited to show you what we actually did accomplish this week with our meals. Starting off night 1, I just had some leftovers because we didn't have many feeling well. We had spaghetti for the kids with some green beans. I had some sliced steak with some feta. Now, the next morning I got up and made a tray of bacon, or 2 as you can see, and laid that all out. I love doing my bacon in the oven. If you haven't ever done that, I highly recommend it. It really saves a ton of time of cleanup around the stove because the grease stays right on those trays. And then depending on what I'm doing next, I can use the grease straight off of those trays or put it in the jar, which you see here, where I'm pulling it out to actually make some eggs for the morning to go with the bacon. Now, these are my little one's favorite eggs. They actually call them mama eggs, and if you can guess, the baby named them. So first things first, you get the pan screaming hot, bacon grease, of course, and then I have onions right there. Now, you can see that I had those in a Ziploc. I actually cut up my onions and freeze them, and that way, when I need to get something done, I'm not actually sitting down to prep ingredients like onions. My sausage is gonna come out of the freezer here just in a second, frozen up as well, already pre-cooked. So I like to take the time to prep those ingredients to save me a lot of times in the morning when the kids are needing me or breakfast needs to be in a hurry, or we also use the same toppings for pizzas and things like that. So throwing the sausage in and getting it warmed up, kind of like a scramble, and then I'm just tossing those eggs right in on top. Some of us like feta on top, some of us don't, so depending on the mix, it'll depend on who gets what and what's going on. Now to finish up breakfast, we have to finish up that bacon. Sometimes I'm able to do this without flipping the bacon, and sometimes I'm not, and it really just all depends on if I take the time to preheat the oven or not. So today I did not. I put it in there a little bit cooler than I had planned, and so as a result, I'm flipping this over. Generally, my favorite way to do that is, of course, the 2-fork method. I'm sure that isn't new to everybody, but 2 forks, flip the bacon, and put it back in. One of the major advantages of this is also that the bacon turns out nice and flat. It doesn't get all wrinkled up, and you can leave it in there until your desired degree of doneness. So here you can see our delicious bacon, nice, flat, and ready to go. Okay, so the next day, I have to tell you, this is the old classic chicken noodle soup for those with the upset tummy. So first thing I did is toss some butter into the pot, and we are going to throw in some more of those onions once this butter actually gets melted. Now, of course, yes, I did leave out the celery here. I didn't have any ready to go right at the time, and I was trying to throw this together in a hurry. So onions into the pot, I'm using what I had handy, and then we're going to move on. Now, what you see here is I'm draining a jar of home canned chicken. This is chicken that I actually roasted off in the Instapot. It was chicken thighs, and then I went ahead and jarred them up using the broth that was in the bottom of the Instapot as my canning liquid for the chicken itself. Now, I poured out that broth into my measuring cup and moved it over to the stove while still sauteing up those onions. The reason I pulled it over to the stove is because I needed a lot more broth than is coming out of that jar. So I pulled out my better than bouillon roasted chicken and put it in here, as you can see. I'm using my pot filler to top this off. I'm headed up to 7 or 8 cups of water, way up at the top. Now, obviously, I could have taken the time to make some chicken stock, but again, when you're in a hurry and you have some sick kids, you're just trying to get it done the best way possible. So one thing I will tell you is I love that better than bouillon, but it does say on there to use hot water and get it all dissolved before you pour it in. I find that completely unnecessary when it's going into a hot pot like this. So I'm filling up that water, and then I'm just going to toss it straight in like that, not completely incorporated. So chicken into the pan first, then scrape down the side of my measuring cup and give it a little stir. Again, not really worrying too much about it. Now I'm going to dump it in here, and yep, you can see the orange flare up down below. Of course, I spilled a little bit out under the edge. So wiping this off, and then I'm going to go back and add just a touch more water in here so I can get all that's left around the edges. and make sure to have enough broth for the soup that we're trying to make here today. Now, the next thing we're going to do is let this simmer for just a little bit of time, making sure that everything gets nice and incorporated. This is the point where I'm warming up that bouillon enough to get fully incorporated with the water and the rest of the stock. Now, in the meantime, you can see I definitely had frozen carrots, not quite ready to go in. I buy those from Azure Standard in a 5-pound box, so it's a great big chunk. So dumping some in here, of course, with baby in hand, and I did manage to get the bag in, setting that aside to handle that later. One project turns into another around here. So I'm going to put some oregano and some basil in here. I think the recipe calls for around a tablespoon each. I just like to measure it off in my hand. Depending on the day, sometimes I'm a little more precise. But again, at this point, getting it in the pot is the goal. So we're going to give this a nice stir. We're also going to add in my egg noodles. Now, these can also be made from home. It's a great way to preserve extra eggs if you have some. But I like to just grab a couple bags from Azure on occasion, throw them in there. I think the recipe called for a cup and a half. My kids like noodles. So I added a few more here. We're going to put those back on the side, let this simmer, and give it 20 or so minutes. Now, in the meantime, I decided to grab my assistant a chair so she can stand over on the side and I can use both hands to go ahead and season up the soup. This is one thing that I think a lot of people don't check enough. You got to make sure to continue to check those seasonings and taste the soup to ensure that you're getting the desired product that you like. My kiddos needing all the electrolytes they can get. The extra salt isn't going to hurt them, but they also need to make sure that it's a soup that they're going to love to taste. So salting it a couple times and then continuing to let it simmer until the soup comes together is a great way to ensure that you're going to have a delicious product at the end. Now, the time has passed and the noodles are tender, so we're going to go ahead and get this into some bowls for those who are feeling up to coming to the table. Unfortunately, not all are. I did deliver some cups of broth to the other room for those who are just a little bit on the weak side and not wanting to go for too much soup right now. Now, this soup turned out to be an absolute hit and one that we managed to use more than once over the next coming days for my kiddos as they didn't feel well and just wanted something calm and gentle on their tummies. Now, turning the corner into Wednesday, I'm going to pull out one of my little one's absolute favorite quick time meals, and she absolutely loves a fresh chicken salad. So what I'm going to do here is go ahead and take the time to cut up a couple sticks of celery and get them washed up. I'm going to grab some of those frozen onions back out of the freezer and toss them together to make a quick chicken salad out of some of that home canned chicken that I've been using the past couple days. Now, I usually don't go for chicken 3 days in a row, but when my kids are sick, they get what they feel like eating. So if somebody feels like eating chicken salad and chicken soup, we're going to make chicken salad and chicken soup. Now, just to go back a bit, I mentioned at the beginning that I actually failed on this week's pantry challenge. I totally did. I don't have enough what I call junk food stocked. I didn't have crackers. I didn't have bread because I usually just make my own when I want it. But I didn't have those basic staples that doctors always say are good for kids when their tummies are upset. So I did run to the store. I got a few different types of crackers and a loaf of bread and decided to make my own to have in the freezer, which I typically have done in the past, just didn't at this time. So that's how I failed. I failed to be prepared for that. I also didn't have any flavored electrolyte waters. My kids don't really like the homemade electrolyte mixes, so I did grab some of those at the store as well. So blew our $20 budget, but in the end, I'm not going to have sick kids who don't have the things that make them feel good and comforted when they're not feeling well. So back to the chicken salad, I just threw in a can of that home canned chicken, some celery that you saw me chop, as well as the onions. Now I'm going to take a jar of mayo and take, I think, 3/4 of a cup, maybe closer to a cup, and put it in the bowl with the other ingredients. The other thing that is important here is salt and pepper, And of course, my little one here is always really eager to do her job and be able to stir as well. So you'll see her here in a minute going for that. Another thing that I like to keep on hand is lemon essential oil. This one is food grade, so I don't know about ones that you might have at home. You might want to check that. But it's great when you need a lemon flavor, but don't have any fresh lemons. And it really, really goes far. Just a few drops, give it a nice punch. So we're going to mix up this chicken salad. They are going to eat it with some crackers, and that is going to be their light lunch for the day. Now, as for me, I do eat all of these ingredients in limited quantities. So, what I decided to do, of course, was skip the crackers because I don't like them anyway. I don't like them in my house. I don't like my kids eating them. Yeah, on and on. But regardless, skip the crackers, and I decided to make myself my own little carnivore version of this after I got it bowled up and got the kids out of the way. In order to do that, I went ahead and grabbed a couple slices of the bacon that we had left over from the day before. I put them in the air fryer. Mine has a reheat function, so not sure if yours would or not. You might want to check, but I use the reheat function to get them nice and delicious without adding any more crispness to them because I didn't want them any crunchier than they already were. I chopped that up into small pieces and then I added it into the chicken salad that was already made so I could add a little bit more fat and protein into the mix because I wasn't going to be having anything additionally with it. And I really don't do snacking anymore since I went to the style diet. I really just eat 1 or 2 meals a day, depending on what's going on in the house. It wasn't that long ago that I couldn't imagine not eating 3 meals and snacking all day. But since I've started eating more fats and more meats, I just don't have the same cravings and I'm not as hungry. I'm completely satisfied where I wasn't before. So if you're not interested or familiar with that way of eating, it's something that seems odd, but once you get into it, it really is really natural to be able to skip a couple meals. Okay, so on to the dinner. A couple days ago, actually before the pantry challenge started, I had mixed up or made a big pot of fresh rice. Now, this is something that I always do stock, so I did have this on hand, and it was good for the kiddos as they were starting to recover. But one of mine that's down right now asked that I change the menu for the night. I did have some venison tenderloin planned, which is his absolute favorite. Because he was sick, he didn't want us to eat that while he was down. Completely understandable. But what he did want was fried rice. So what you're seeing here is I got a cast iron skillet screaming hot, threw some avocado oil in, followed by those freezer onions making their appearance yet again. So onions into the pan, and then I actually keep a frozen vegetable mix, which is corn, peas, and carrots. I added those to the pan as well. I actually mainly use those just for times like this when we want fried rice. Getting those all cooked down and really sauteed nicely, and then we're going to go ahead and add the additional ingredients. Now, I know it's almost embarrassing how much we're eating chicken this week because it actually isn't common, and you'll see that as we go forward. This is going to be a chicken fried rice. So yet one more time, that delicious chicken is coming out, and as a result, I'm going to have to make up some more and get that back on the shelf here because we are running through it right now. Now, again, getting the little one her chair over there so she can watch. She loves to be up at the stove and watch what's going on. Now I am reserving the liquid from that awesome chicken yet again. Now I don't need it today, so I am going to set this aside, put it in the refrigerator, and then I will have it to pull out the next time I need some delicious chicken stock. So now it's time for Princess to get back up on her chair so she can watch what we're doing. And then I'm going to go ahead and toss this chicken into the pan. I like to get it a little bit on the crispy side, so I'm going to leave this in the bottom of the pan for just a moment and make sure to get all of the liquid cooked off of it so it doesn't leave my dish still on the soggy side. So you can see that steam cooking off. And then we're going to just go ahead and continue to stir it around for a moment until all of the remaining liquid kind of cooks off of that in order to make sure that we get it nice and crispy. When I'm in the kitchen cooking, as you can see, I'm never alone. So I've got little one up here at the stove and brother back there practicing his dribbling before he goes to ball practice tonight. He actually jabbers my ear off about basketball on and on and on, which is really cute because he's so excited. This is the week leading up to his first ever basketball game. So he's telling me all about what position he plays, where his friends play, and eventually you'll see in a minute here, he's going to go draw a picture and come back so he can make sure that I'm knowing exactly what's going on with him. But back to the food, this is looking pretty good. Now for a little bit of Asian flavor, I'm going to go ahead and add in some soy sauce here. Sometimes I use Bragg's liquid aminos and sometimes I just go with straight soy. So use whatever you have on hand to get the flavor that you're desiring in your fried rice. Now as this continues to cook off just slightly, I'm going to go ahead and scrape a little spot here in the middle, throw in a couple of chunks of butter, and then I'm going to make that space to where I can fry up my eggs right there in the middle of the rice itself. Now, of course, originally you can see I thought, put my eggs in before I decided on the butter. So getting the butter melted, tossing in the eggs, and then I'm just going to get those scrambled up right in the middle. I don't cook them completely. I know different people do that differing ways. If you want to have a big chunk of egg, you can scramble them even in another pan and add them in. I love one pot meals. I love one pot cleanup. So that's what you're seeing here. I'm letting them set just a little bit before crunching up the yolks, giving them a stir, and then incorporating it into the entire mixture right there in front. The eggs are completely optional, but it is a great way to add some more nutrition into the meal because you have the protein of the eggs right there added into the rice, and often they don't even see it if they're not scrambled into big chunks. That said, my kids obviously love eggs. We have 20 laying hens in the backyard right now, and most of the time when we're not sick, we keep up with the chickens, having 10 to 12 eggs a day. Now, this is rice that I had cold in the refrigerator. When I cook up rice, I always try to cook a little bit extra so I can keep cold rice in the refrigerator just for purposes like this. Cold rice makes the best fried rice. It keeps it from getting sticky and gooey. So I am just tossing in my rice here and giving it a good stir once it gets incorporated. I like it to get a little bit crunchy on the bottom, so you'll see me kind of pat it down. That's totally your call. Do what works for your family. In the upper corner, you can see Mr. Basketball there does have his paper drawn out, and he's giving me all the details of their plays so I can see exactly what's going on because I'm not making it to practice right now, staying home and nursing these little kiddos back to health. So it's always enjoyable to listen to him go on about things that he's passionate about, which he is definitely doing during this rice cook. I continue to let the rice cook in the pan, pressing it to the bottom to get it nice and flat so those bottom bits get a little bit crispy before adding in some extra butter on top. I find this gives it awesome flavor, and yes, you did just see me toss a chunk of straight butter in my mouth. I've loved butter since I was a kid, no secret there, and that is one of the best snacks or treats you can toss in on the carnivore diet. So there you have it. Now I can officially do something that I've loved my whole life and not feel guilty about it while losing weight and feeling great. So win-win for me. All right, now on to my meal itself. Now that the rice is done, I'm going to have some sliced steak pan fried really quick and added with some feta cheese. Now, the thing about my steak, I actually do custom butchering annually and get it sliced super thin. I always ask the processor for like their jerky slice or their super thin slice. We do that so when we're making things like chow mein, or other meals for the kids that they can eat it super easily, and we don't have to spend our entire meal chopping up meat for the kids. So this works for things like Philly cheesesteak, even just for steak, which I'm gonna have tonight, without adding anything extra to it. But you can just run your knife through it super fast, and then it makes these tiny little ribbons of steak that people don't have to spend a lot of time working to chew. Super easy for kids. It's great for the top of salads if you do salads and that kind of thing. So right here you can see all I'm doing is salting and peppering, tossing it in a hot cast iron skillet, brown it on one side, flip it over, and then pull it out. You can see the juices that are puddling down on my white plate here at the bottom. It is absolutely delicious, And I like to cook up even more that I'm gonna need at a time. Throwing this in the refrigerator, then I can put it in the air fry to reheat when I just want one or two pieces throughout the day. You will see me use this for leftover lunches. Anytime the kids are having something that I'm actually not interested in, even if it's for dinner and I don't want to make myself a complete second meal, I love to keep this on hand. It is super, super easy for myself. My kids love it too, obviously, so sometimes a little thief will sneak in and take it away from me, but nonetheless, this is delicious all by itself. So butter on top and then usually a little bit of feta sets it right off, and over to the table we go. This is what I am having tonight while the kids have their fried rice. It is absolutely awesome. Now, next day, one of my little chefs is finally feeling better. He's been wanting to do deviled eggs and hard boiled eggs with our homegrown eggs for a long time, but we've heard it's super hard with fresh eggs, so we wanted to test it out. So this is the 5-5-5 method. We put 13 eggs in here. Recipe called for 12, but my little one wanted to add an extra. Into the Instapot, 1 cup of water. We left them on high pressure for 5 minutes. Let them cool automatically, natural release for 5 minutes. And then what you're seeing now is that time being up, we're removing all the eggs and tossing them into a bottle or a bowl of cold water with ice. These came out excellent. They were so easy to peel. I have never had anything come off so easily. You can see even the 2-year-old here is peeling her eggs. She's doing quite a good job. Although I will say, we got to the end of the hard boil part and she thought she needed to crack them like a regular egg. So a couple of hers have a spot where she pushed both of her thumbs in to try to rip them open. Nonetheless, we got the eggs done. Unfortunately, I failed to get a little bit of footage of my guys putting the deviled eggs together, but they were absolutely great. Now, we are on to Friday. Friday is a family favorite around here, and I asked the gang if they were feeling up to it. They said yes, so here we go with our pizza day. Now, this is a crust that we made up earlier in the week, and I put it in the freezer because I actually made it on Sunday. When I pulled it out on Wednesday, I slowly let it thaw in the refrigerator, so it is perfectly ready to go for Friday. Now, this is a crust that I make with 50% freshly ground soft white wheat and 50% of the King Arthur bread flour. I don't actually normally buy the King Arthur bread flour, but I found a 50-pound bag at a local discount grocer for $10. So needless to say, I didn't pass that up, and I've been using it half and half with my baked goods for quite a while now. Absolutely loving it. Now, as we get both the crust out, the kids always love to come in for a pizza time. So right now he's asking me if he can help me press these out, but at this time they're still super cold. So we're going to throw them out and let them warm up as I take the baby upstairs and get her down for her nap, coming back later to be able to more efficiently get them pressed out and going for their second rise. During this time, I do keep them covered with some plastic wrap. I usually just reuse the same one out of the freezer, but one of these had burst a little bit, so I went ahead and got a new piece for that, giving them just a little bit of olive oil in order to make that happen. Here you can see I'm getting a little bit of help pushing that dough out. He's bringing over a chair so he can get involved. But again, since they are so cold, it's just a little bit tough at this point. We decided to let them rest, and we are going to come back in a little bit and let them go at this time. Now you can see it's later in the day. Yet another helper has arrived for pizza time, and everybody loves pressing these out. We are trying to get them out to the edges. You can do shape any that you like. I just love these Pampered Chef square baking stones. They make excellent crust and they fit perfectly in my oven, so that's what we're doing. Now here you can see two littles grabbing some snacks. This is raw cheddar and some deer sausage that is made from the deer that we actually were able, or the boys were actually able to harvest this year. So this is the type of snack that we do often at our house, something that's going to be high protein. We try to stay away from all the processed stuff, although my kids do get quite a few meals that involve tortilla chips. So we still do purchase those just to have something convenience-wise around. And I do make garden fresh salsa every year. So tortilla chips are the one thing that remains. But typically what you're seeing here with the raw cheese and the deer sausage is going to be it. Now I am grating up a quarter cup of Parmesan. This is a cheese that I actually got from Azure recently. I hadn't tried their Parmesan before, but I'm really liking it. So freshly grated Parmesan. What I am doing is getting ready to make my carnivore pizza crust, which is totally solving my craving for pizza without getting into the carb world. So I'm using that quarter cup Parmesan to go into it. And I'm also over here in the freezer pulling out some of my frozen mozzarella. I love to buy my cheese in 5 pound blocks and shred it myself because I hate the texture of store shredded cheese. It's so, I don't, they usually put some kind of starch or some kind of powder on there. Sometimes it's even like a wheat, like a gluten to keep it from sticking together. And when I purchase it and do it myself, of course, I'm not doing that. And I've never had any problem with my cheese out of the freezer. So right now I'm pouring out 3 cups of shredded mozzarella. Again, that's something that I get from Azure. I'm able to save a lot of money getting an organic cheese from them than I would if I actually purchased it at a store. So 3 cups of my shredded mozzarella are going to go into the brown bowl over here with the quarter cup of Parmesan that you saw me shred earlier. And of course, I poured way too much cheese in here the first time, so getting it back down where it needs to go. But 3 cups of the shredded cheese into the bowl, quarter cup of the Parmesan, and then I'm going to do 4 eggs. Now, these again are our eggs from home, and it looks like somebody's trying to add their little horsey to the mix. Thankfully, I did get that one pulled back out. But 4 of our eggs directly from the farm here are going into this crust. Now, I actually love this. I've done it twice so far, and I have heard of a couple other carnivore crust options that use chicken, but as you've noticed, we have hit our shredded chicken pretty hard this week. So leaving out the chicken and just going with this egg, cheese, and cheese. And then once it's blended up, I actually have had my cast iron huge 14-inch in the stove preheating. So I'm going to go ahead and spread out my mixture here and gently get it patted out into a pizza shape. Of course, with it not being like a traditional wheat crust, it's not stretchy, but you can easily just press it out into the shape you want. I do recommend using something with sides. This isn't a pizza pan, but a pizza pan with sides would be just as easy to use. I just love this cast iron skillet, use it all the time and had it ready to go. So pressing this out, I'm going to bake it off for 15 minutes until it's light and golden brown in the oven. And then at that time, it needs to come out and cool completely. You do not want your cheese and egg to still be warm when you top it and throw it back in the oven, or it's not going to be like a crust. It's just going to be all kind of gooey. So in order to give it the best possible finish, you want this to be cooled 100%. So at this point, into the oven, and then out of the oven to get it cooled. Now, in the meantime, I'm cranking up my stove. It goes to 500 degrees for the pizza crust that I'm using, which is actually the King Arthur Detroit style recipe. If you want to look it up, I'll put it down in the comments, but we absolutely love it. One reason is because with Detroit style, it is this shape and the stuff goes all the way to the edges. Now, as you can see here, one of these crusts is getting butter. I have a girly who does not like pizza, but loves cheese sticks. So what that basically means is I'm cutting it into a different shape for her. I know, crazy, right? But she's not getting marinara. We're going to do some butter, and then I'm going to put some garlic on there, as well as some feta and a bunch of that shredded mozzarella that we mentioned earlier. Now, in the meantime, my other little helper down here is spreading out the marinara sauce. Sometimes I make my own. This is a jarred. It really just depends on what I have the energy for. And as I've mentioned a couple times, this house has been incredibly sick this week. No extra time for things like that. As you can see, the little girl here in the middle in the green jammies is not at her best. She just crawled out of the recliner because she couldn't help but want to come and help to top the pizzas. So even though kids aren't well, sometimes they just really love being involved. Pizza night is super fun. And as you can tell, I love having my kids in the kitchen. The more they put their hands on the food, the more they want to eat the food, the more adventurous they are with trying it. And I feel like this rings true, especially for the garden. Whatever they're helping me grow, they can't wait to put in their mouth. So that kind of pulls through to the kitchen. Everything takes longer, yes. Sometimes hands get dirty. Sometimes things get messy. Sometimes things get completely destroyed and we have to start over. But typically, that's not the case. The kids have fun and they're involved in the creation of real food. So they know what it looks like to make a meal and they can help me out when I need extra hands. Now, at this time, one of my biggest helpers is off sick in the other room. I usually have one extra set of hands from my oldest, and he is a huge help. Like, he can run these pizzas himself and top one while I'm working on the other. But that just goes to show that they're watching and they love to help. And it's great to have them all in the kitchen making messes, even if they're pouring out shredded cheese all over the edge of the counter and on the floor, like little Miss Purple Shirt is up there at the top. So, okay, down on the bottom pizza, he added pepperoni. I'm adding some of that crumbled sausage that I told you about earlier in the week out of the freezer that we use for the eggs. Now, I will say that the sausage from the freezer is not my favorite. My favorite way to do sausage is to can it. Then it's shelf stable and I don't have it frozen in those hard clumps. And I can just pull what I want out of the jar and put it back in the refrigerator. And I don't have to wait for it to warm up or have the excess fat on there. When I don't have time to can some up, I just grind or brown one pan at a time or 1 pound at a time of the ground sausage, and then let it cool completely, toss it in a Ziploc, and let it go from there. So sausage on the bottom one, then we added onions. I'm throwing feta on the top and helping them get that done. And what you're seeing here is we're getting out the homegrown banana peppers, which were in one of my little guy's stockings last year for Christmas. They love banana peppers, so it was a real treat for them to be able to grow them. And I have to say, our seeds did amazing. Our pepper year was great. These are from Baker Creek, and they were the banana peppers, and they just did a fabulous job. Okay, so sometimes we add extra toppings. Tonight we're stopping with what we have here. See, I'm breaking up more of that frozen shredded cheese, and we're going to throw it on top of this other pizza and get them off into the oven. So I mentioned before, these go in at 500 degrees, and they will be in for 12 to 15 minutes. Now, I went ahead and moved over the cheese sticks. Everybody's jostling for their position to make sure that they're in their own specific chairs that are pulled over from the table. Everybody wants to be able to shred out the cheese. So sometimes that involves a little bit of Tetris to get them all into their spots. But that's what we're doing to make everyone happy, especially little miss down here who doesn't feel well. If she wants to be in a specific spot, everybody around here, except for one, has already been sick and knows what it feels like. So they are ready to do what they can to help her through that rough patch as well. So last of the cheese going on here, except I decided it's not quite enough. So we're going to grab that bag up at the top by the wall and toss on a little bit extra before we throw it into the oven. Now, as I was watching all of my footage back for the week, I couldn't believe how often I've used these same exact baking stones. I use them nonstop. If you are interested in something similar, I have a link down in the description that goes to a Pampered Chef link to get these. These are the large stone bar pans, and they are fabulous. They're my absolute favorite. I cook in them often. I also use their bread pans. So if it's something that you're interested in looking at for yourself, they don't stick. They're really, really great, and they make just an absolutely delicious crust. So link in the comments if you want to order. We'll leave it open at least until the end of February. Okay, so back to my Carnivore pizza. I did just go ahead and top that cooled crust with some of the marinara sauce. I'm tossing on some of the sausage that you see here, and then I'm going to add some onion. I did skip the pepperoni for myself, and I do know that some people are in debate over if you can do onion or not on Carnivore. My personal way of doing it is that I do like onions, I like garlic, and I'm using peppers. Other than that, that's really the vegetable limit of what I'm doing. Of course, everybody can be as strict or unstrict as they want to be. This is feta. I do a lot of feta, but this is not my favorite feta by any means. My favorite feta comes in a 4-pound block from Azure, and I usually get that, but this last month on my Azure order, it was back ordered. I did not get what I wanted, and I was super sad about that because it comes in a delicious salty brine. It is so, so, so good. but this will do in the meantime. So I did top this off with just a bit more mozzarella. Now, not a ton because there's enough cheesy flavor with that really cheesy crust. So we're just gonna toss this in, and I'm just gonna wait until it is brown and bubbly. I'm not looking to cook much of anything because everything's already done. Now, in the meantime, I let these guys cool over in the oven, and I'm gonna go around the edge with my big pizza little spatula. I always forget to do this. You're supposed to do this straight out of the oven because the cheese and the sauce go all the way up to the edge on a Detroit style pizza. Doing this right away prevents it from sticking to the edge. I failed. I fail often at that, but it's just what goes on around here when things get busy. So I'm going back now before I cut it and going around those edges and trying my best to get them off as easily as possible before I cut the pizza. Now, once that is done, I'm going to go ahead and cut it up. The pizza on the top of your screen is our cheese stick. So how dare I call it a pizza? It's going to get sliced across and then once down the middle. It doesn't turn into tiny squares. If I need them any smaller, I just cut the actual long skinny sticks in half to make them a little bit smaller. The other one I do cut into squares. Again, like I said, they're going to be pretty small tonight. I don't know who's going to be able to actually eat much, but they get what they ask for. The bread portion should be pretty good for them. We had a few take several pieces that were feeling pretty good, and then we ended up with a couple that just wanted a little taste and didn't go too far. But the good news is I never, ever waste either one of these. They go into the refrigerator. We warm them up as needed. Somebody actually hit this for breakfast the next morning, so it doesn't last long around here, and it makes a great Sunday evening, Sunday afternoon, or even into Monday, Tuesday snack for everybody else. Now, as you can see, I just pulled out my personal pizza, thought it was good, and then I thought, yeah, the cheese is melted, but it's not brown. So I put it back in, I turned up the broiler, and forgot it. So as you can see, it is a touch more done because I got busy with the kiddos. But here we are at the table. Little lady there loves it. She's crazy. And here's a look at mine. It is Saturday night, and I just finished up recording my canuary video for the Sutton's Days collaboration for canuary. Now, if you haven't checked that out, I'll put the link in the playlist. But why I'm telling you that tonight is because I have a lot of my pork shoulder left over. I was actually gonna end up running a second load in my canner, but we're tired and hungry after my kiddo had a basketball game today. So we're gonna take some of this pork roast that I had seared off in a cast iron skillet and put it in the Instapot. It'll take 15 minutes at high pressure, then a 15-minute cool down, and we're gonna have dinner ready to go. And on top of that, we're gonna throw in some potatoes that I had cooked from my garden and actually put them in the oven with some onions and roast off those vegetables. So my total prep time tonight is gonna be maybe 5 minutes, and we're gonna have a delicious meal on the table here shortly. So let me show you what it looks like. The pork chunks are going on a trivet in the pot. I'm gonna add a cup of water underneath, and then those are going over to the side in the pot itself. Like I said, 15 minutes pressure, 15-minute cool down, and we will be ready to go. Now, as for the potatoes themselves, this is something that I had never tried and was a little bit nervous about. But I grew a lot of potatoes this year. And so instead of canning them all up, I wanted to try a few different methods. These were just diced and vacuum sealed. I didn't even peel them all the way. And then I froze them. They pulled out and I thawed them in the refrigerator over the week. I noticed quite a bit of water on them, and so I was a little nervous about that. I drained them off in my colander and then set them in the sink while I was prepping up the rest of what's going to go on our sheet pan. So when we put onions on a sheet pan, we just like to leave them rather large because some people really, really love them, and then others can make the choice to go ahead and discard them or just leave them on the tray if they like. So I'm going to just take this onion and slice it up into great big chunks, leaving it on the pan. We're also going to add some cloves of garlic that we also grew here. And I actually don't completely peel them all the way, as you'll see here in a little bit. I like to just be able to squeeze them out once they're already cooked if the peel doesn't come off easy. I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing that. Just a little rub through my hands, take off the extra peel that wants to come off, and then we're done. But as for the onions, slit it in half, Then you're just going to run your knife through it really fast. It's going to go to the sheet pan and be tossed in oil with everything else. So potatoes are drained and we are going to put them out here. Now, it didn't take me too long to realize, okay, fine. I have a few more potatoes than this specific sheet pan is going to handle. So I went ahead and cleaned my second one. Here we are again for the millionth time this week using the same vessel to cook in. So I'm going to move over a bunch of the potatoes. We're going to put the onions out. I don't even break them up. I like them to lay in great big chunks. What the side that's down on these pans gets really kind of brown and caramelized and really delicious. So I like to leave them in great big chunks just for the ease of use. So potatoes are out. And then what we're going to do is we're going to throw on some avocado oil and run through some salt and pepper once all of these chunks are on here. Once that is done, I like to give everything a really good toss to make sure it's evenly coated. Sometimes I do add all the vegetables into a bowl first and give them a really good toss to make sure everything's perfect. But today I was not in the mood for extra dishes because I have been canning in the kitchen all day and I wanted to take a break. So quick and easy the way it is, the fewer the dishes, the better. So oil, salt, and pepper, and then these beauties are ready to go in the oven. I think I put them in at 425. Sometimes I do 450. I like to roast them up hot and high. Now these potatoes, fresh out of the freezer, already felt soft, so I wasn't necessarily worried about softening them up. More the fact that my kids love it when they are crispy. So after they had been in the oven for 20 minutes, I pulled them out, gave them a good scrape and a toss, and put them back in on the other side so they can get a little more done. These potatoes didn't crisp up quite as fast as they typically do, in my opinion, because they were so wet to begin with. So I did turn up the broiler and put them under it for just a few minutes to make sure they got nice and crispy for the kiddos. Now this is what my finished product plate looked like for the kids. I'm throwing out a little bit of sauerkraut, some of the delicious potatoes, and a couple of chunks of that delicious pork, which actually pulled apart. They ended up adding some barbecue sauce and it didn't last long. Now mine was just onions, garlic, and the pork, and it was great. So that's a wrap for week 1. You've got all the meals that we had time to record. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you back next week. If you're new to the channel, please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you back soon. Bye, friends.